During a family dinner, my mother announces that my estranged sister will move in with my husband, my children, and me. My sister's entitlement and past betrayals ignite explosive confrontations, forcing me to set firm boundaries, protect my kids, and reclaim my home and self-respect. I never expected a simple family dinner to feel like a ticking time bomb. My name's Anna Hayes, I'm 34, and I live in Columbus, Ohio, with my husband, Mark, and our 2 kids, Sophie, 8, and Leo, 5. We gathered around the scarred wooden table in my childhood kitchen, roasted chicken steaming in the center, mashed potatoes piled high, green beans glistening with butter. Mark told a joke about Leo's failed attempt to juggle grapes, and Sophie shrieked with laughter as Grandma Jo clapped her hands. The clatter of silverware and clinking of glasses felt warm and ordinary, like every Thursday night since we'd moved home. I watched my mother's pursed smile as she passed gravy, her eyes flicking between us with something unreadable. The familiar scent of thyme and melting butter should have comforted me, but a tight knot coiled in my stomach. I tried to focus on Mark tracing playful patterns on Sophie's arm, on Leo's sticky fingers, on my mother's laughter lines, but the quiet dread pulsed under my skin. Then my mother cleared her throat, and the room stilled like the world holding its breath. "Anna," she said, voice airy as if she were announcing dessert, "Leela's coming to stay with us for a little while." Her tone was casual, almost cheerful, as though she'd just invited us to try her famous pecan pie. Mark paused mid-chew, spoon hanging above his bowl. Sophie's smile faltered. Leo tipped his head, eyes wide. My heart seized in my chest. Leela, my estranged sister with a history of unpaid rent, broken promises, and the kind of volatility that had driven me to block her number for years, was moving in under my roof. I froze, fingers tightening around my napkin so hard the fabric creased. "Mom, I began, voice brittle, but my mother waved me off. "You'll manage, she's family." Her words landed like a hammer blow. The steam from my plate curled in the air, and I realized I hadn't tasted a single bite. Mark set down his spoon, concern flickering in his eyes, but my mother clasped her hands in that determined way she does when she's decided on something. In that charged silence, I felt every heartbeat thunder in my ears. The warmth drained out of the room, replaced by an icy tension I could taste on my tongue. I'd spent weeks mapping out my schedule, clients to meet, yoga classes to teach, errands to run, and I'd carved out precious breathing space in our home. Now all of it threatened to shatter. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow, as I realized this dinner wasn't just another Thursday night. It was the moment everything changed. I forced a smile I didn't feel and nodded, though my voice caught in my throat. My mother's satisfied nod was the last thing I saw before dark panic clouded my vision. What had started as a cozy family dinner had become a crucible, and I knew with sudden, cold clarity that nothing would ever be the same. I couldn't sleep. The mileage of my thoughts kept me tangled in the darkness. Every time I closed my eyes, my mother's offhand announcement echoed in my skull, loud as a siren. "Leela's coming to stay with us for a little while." I stared at the glow of my phone, replaying Leela's last angry voicemail, her voice snarling about me being the perfect little sister who never had a single problem. My fingers trembled as I thumbed through old text threads, reminders of unpaid rent notices and promises she never kept. The house was silent, but for the hum of the air conditioner, yet I could almost hear Leela's laugh rattle down the hallway, see her door swing open without knocking. I hugged my pillow, pressing it into my face to muffle the panic rising in my chest. What would it be like to have her here again? Boxed-up nightmares of broken dishes and midnight screaming matches flashed on the inside of my eyelids. I saw her plucking money from my purse, leaving behind nothing but scrawled IOUs, and the taste of humiliation stung in my throat. I wanted to text my mom right then, demand she undo her reckless invitation, but my gut twisted. Was I truly unwilling to help my sister, or was I just afraid? The word selfish buzzed like a hornet in my mind, and I clenched the sheets to keep from lashing out. Behind my bedroom door, I paced. One hand clutched my phone. The other swept my hair back in a hurried gesture I'd used a million times in front of clients. "Mom, I can't take her in," I whispered to the empty hallway, practicing the refusal that felt more like a plea for permission. I imagined her patient, disappointed nod, just as she'd given at dinner, and the disappointment cut me deeper than any heated argument ever had. Guilt gnawed at me. I was her older sister, supposed to protect her, even when she betrayed me. But I also had a life here. 2 children who needed routines and a husband whose quiet support I couldn't jeopardize. My chest tightened until breathing felt like a negotiation with my own body. I pictured waking Mark at dawn, sharing my fears in hushed words so the kids wouldn't overhear. I'd tell my mother she'd misjudged me, that I needed more time, time to adjust, time to steel myself for the chaos Leela always brought in her wake. Yet part of me whispered that this wasn't just fear, it was self-preservation. If I let Leela stay, I'd be on edge every minute, waiting for the next betrayal. Hours passed in anxious blinks, and I realized the night had given me nothing but questions. The sky outside my window began to pale, gray light seeping in as if pitying my turmoil. By dawn, I sat at the edge of my bed, phone in hand, my heart still pounding but my mind finally clear. I would call my mother before breakfast and lay down my terms. No Leela, not now, not ever without serious assurances. But as I hovered over the send button, my resolve felt fragile, like a house of cards in a breeze. And I knew, as the first bird outside my window began to sing, that once I made that call, there'd be no turning back. I never thought a cup of coffee could taste like betrayal. Morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds as I sat opposite my mother and Mark, the steam from our mugs fogging the air between us. My mother stirred sugar into her latte, eyes fixed on the swirling cream like it held the answer. Mark cleared his throat, pushing his coffee aside, and I realized this conversation had become inevitable. I took a breath. "Mom, about Leela moving in." My voice was tight, each word clipped. She looked up, brows lifting. "It's temporary," she said, voice casual, as if she were discussing weekend plans. Mark ducked his head, stirring his coffee without looking at me. I pressed on, forcing calm into my tone. "You know what she's like. She's broken curfews, borrowed money she never paid back, even skipped bail once. I can't just let her waltz in here and wreck everything I've built." My words felt jagged, but I refused to back down. My mother's lips thinned. "Family duty," she repeated, as though reciting a mantra. I leaned forward, heat creeping into my cheeks. "Family duty doesn't mean letting her treat us like a safety net. Mark, you saw what happened last time. She took your tools to sell them off." Mark shifted, glancing at me, then at his untouched mug. His silence felt like a betrayal, making my chest tighten even more. "I don't want to fight about this," my mother said, voice wavering. "She needs a place to stay." I rubbed a hand over my forehead, heart pounding. "And what about my needs?" I asked, voice rising despite myself. "What if I need peace? What if Sophie's school schedule can't handle midnight tantrums? What if Leo wakes up to find her gone again?" Tears pricked at my eyes, the rawness of my fears laid bare between us. Mark finally spoke, voice low. "Anna's right," he said, looking at our mother. "I don't want Leela here." My mother's shoulders slumped and she let out a long sigh. "You two are overreacting," she snapped. "She's my daughter. She's family." My calm cracked. Anger and hurt collided in my chest, fueling the words spilling out. "Family isn't the same as freedom to manipulate and hurt people. You're forcing me to clean up her messes, to pick up the pieces when she decides to leave." My mother's eyes glistened with tears. Mark reached for my hand, giving it a squeeze, but I pulled back, too raw to accept comfort. The kitchen felt smaller, walls closing in as old wounds gaped open. My mother's lips quivered. "You still blame me for what happened years ago," she whispered. I shook my head, voice trembling. "I blame you for letting her hurt me. I blame you for thinking my life is disposable whenever she needs a favor." My mother closed her eyes, shoulders heaving. Mark stood, offering me a nod. I exhaled hard, feeling both liberated and shattered. Without another word, I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood on tile rang in the tense silence. My mother's face was pale as she stared at me. I gathered up my coffee mug, hands unsteady, and walked toward the hallway. Mark followed, but I didn't wait for him. I reached the front door and swung it open with all the force I could muster. The slam echoed through the house like a verdict. I stood on the porch, chest heaving, the door's reverberation still humming in my ears. Inside, I could hear my mother's shaky intake of breath, Mark's footsteps, and something else, resignation. As the door clicked shut behind me, I didn't look back. Fear and determination warred behind my pulse, but one thing was clear. I had drawn a line in the sand, and I wasn't backing down. The moving truck's rumble felt like a war drum at dawn. I stepped onto the front porch just as Leela hauled her first box up the driveway, her smirk catching the pale light. She'd aged into a sharper version of herself, eyes calculating, posture loose with confidence. I managed a polite "good morning," but she brushed past me without breaking stride. "Where's the master bedroom?" she called over her shoulder, voice lilting with entitlement. My chest tightened as I pointed toward the hallway, and she shot me a look that said I'd already lost. Inside, Mark offered to help carry boxes, but I waved him off, my stomach twisting. Leela dumped her things on the plush bed, designer shoes, half-empty liquor bottles, a battered duffel bag, then stretched luxuriously against the headboard. "This is where I always stay," she declared, barely glancing at me. I opened my mouth to protest, to remind her that this was my home, but she cut me off. Don't start, Anna. By afternoon, her presence had echoed through every room. I heard the bass from her stereo rattling the window panes as I tried to focus on work calls at the kitchen table. When I discovered $10 missing from my purse, I found the IOU she'd scribbled on a crumpled napkin. Borrowed, will pay you back. The familiar sting of betrayal flared in my chest. I placed the note beside my laptop, my fingers brushing the ink as if it burned. Why didn't you tell me you needed money? I asked that evening, voice steady but low. She looked up from her phone, brows finally knitting. I didn't know you'd care, she replied, eyes narrowing. I thought family helped family without strings. My breath hitched. I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times, but her casual defiance twisted my rehearsed lines into knots. I forced a smile and picked up her napkin. Family help, I said softly, sliding it back across the table. Doesn't come with empty promises. She snorted and tossed back her head. Promises are for people who keep them, she shot back, tapping her phone screen for emphasis. The dining room lights flickered, once, twice like a warning. My heart pounded so loudly I could almost hear it over her stereo. Sophie peeked around the corner, eyes wide, clutching Leo's hand. I plastered on a calm facade and crouched to meet her gaze. Everything's fine, I whispered, though my voice trembled. Sophie nodded, but I saw the doubt in her bright eyes. That night I lay on the couch in the living room, too restless to face my own bed. The low thump of Leela's music vibrated through the walls, a reminder that my boundaries were already dissolving. I reached for my phone to call Mom, to say please rescue me from this mess, but my thumb hovered over her name. Rescue me, I thought, but realized neither of them understood how deep the chaos ran. A sudden crash from upstairs jolted me upright. My pulse snapped tight in my throat. Sophie's soft sob drifted down the hall, and I shot to my feet, abandoning any remaining pretense of calm. As I raced toward Leela's room, I braced myself for the worst, and knew nothing could prepare me for what I'd find next. I smelled alcohol before I heard her stumble through the front door, sweet, sharp, like spilled perfume laced with vinegar. I was tucking Leo into bed when Leela burst into the hallway, her laughter slurred, her hair mussed. What's the point of these stupid rules? She barked, swaying against the wall. I dropped Leo's teddy and stepped forward, voice calm but firm. Enough, Leela, you're drunk, go to your room. She spun on me, eyes wild. Or what, Anna, you'll call the cops? Her words cut through the quiet house like shards of glass. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a rule break, it was a challenge. I squared my shoulders. You're breaking my home, my children's peace. Get out of the living room. My voice wavered, but I held the line. She lunged at me, fingers clawing at my shirt. Metal from the decorative bowl behind her flashed in the dim light, and it shattered against the wall with a deafening crack. Shards skittered across the hardwood as Sophie's scream pierced the air. Mark barreled down the hall, grabbing Leela's arms and pulling her back. Leela, stop! He yelled, his face pale. Leela twisted free, her heel catching the edge of the rug, and she lurched to the floor with a thud. Anna, stop this. My mother's frantic cry echoed from the doorway. She stood frozen by the kitchen entrance, tears streaming down her cheeks. My heart slammed, anger and fear fused into something fierce. I stepped over the broken porcelain and pointed at my mother. You brought this on us, Mom. You set her loose in my house. My voice cracked, raw with years of buried fury. Leela spat a curse and lurched back to her feet, swaying. I didn't ask for any of this, I shouted, pointing at Leela. She's used you since forever. I kicked a shard of white clay and it crunched under my boot. Mark pulled me into his arms, steadying my trembling frame, but I wrenched free and faced them both. My chest heaved, eyes burning. She's not staying another night, I said, voice quiet but unbreakable. Silence slammed into the room harder than any crash. My mother's shoulders sagged, Leela's defiant posture faltered, and the splintered bowl lay between us, a jagged testament to everything we'd lost. I stood amid the wreckage, heart pounding, the acrid tang of broken dreams in the air. And as I met their stunned faces, I knew this was the moment I'd chosen sides, my family's safety over old loyalty. The house was scarred now, but so was I, and for the first time in years I felt unbroken. The dawn light revealed more than just shattered glass. It showed the fractures in all of us. I stood in the living room, heart pounding, as Mark gathered Sophie's trembling hand and led her to safety in his arms. Leo clutched my ankle, eyes wide, his teddy bear pressed against his cheek. My mother hovered nearby, shoulders stooped in guilt, while Leela leaned against the hallway wall, silent and sullen. Broken porcelain and spilled wine soaked into the rug like bloodstains, a brutal reminder of last night's fight. I drew a slow breath, feeling every muscle ache from the confrontation. Everyone okay? I asked, voice gentle but firm. Sophie nodded against Mark's chest. Leo managed a small, yes, Mama, though his voice shook. My mother sniffled, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I crouched to Leo's level, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're safe," I said, voice steadying. I glanced at my mother, then at Leela, who watched without meeting my eyes. "I need to make something clear." I rose, feeling the weight of their gazes. "Leela, you have 1 week," I said, setting my jaw. "Either you enter rehab or you find somewhere else to stay." The words came out in measured pulses, each one deliberate. My mother inhaled sharply, but she didn't interrupt. Leela's jaw clenched, her eyes flashed with anger, or was it fear? "You can't do this," my mother said, voice quivering. "She's my daughter." "I'm protecting mine," I replied, turning my gaze to her. "I won't let her hurt my kids or you anymore." Silence stretched, heavy as the morning air. The only sound was Sophie's quiet sob, and I felt a pang of grief for my daughter's broken sense of safety. Leela looked away, arms folding across her chest. The pink of early sun seeped through the windows, bathing the room in forgiving light. My mother took a shaky step forward. I understand," she murmured. "If that's what it takes." Her voice cracked, but she nodded. Mark exhaled beside me, relief and sorrow mingling in his features. I closed my eyes briefly, tasting the strange mix of victory and loss. Boundaries had been drawn in blood and tears, but at least they were clear now. Leela's shoulders slumped as she sank to the floor, back against the wall. She looked small, lost, even without the armor of defiance. I knelt beside her, heart softening. "I want you to get better," I said quietly. "I want us all to find our way back." Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment I thought she might speak. But she remained silent, staring at the broken bowl. I stood and brushed dust from my jeans, every movement deliberate. "Give me your word," I said, voice low but unwavering. "Promise me you'll go to rehab. Promise you'll try." She closed her eyes, breathing hard. Then she exhaled, nodding once. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was enough. My mother stepped forward to help clear the wreckage, and Mark gathered Sophie and Leo into a group hug. I watched them, my heart easing for the first time in days. The house was a mess, but the air felt different, taut but hopeful. I knew the next week would be hard. Calls to facilities, hushed conversations, more tears. But as I reached down to pick up the largest shard of the broken bowl, I felt the solidity of my choice. I was no longer the sister who stifled her pain to keep the peace. I was Anna Hayes, 34, a mother, a wife, a daughter, and I would not let my family crumble again. And as I set the piece of porcelain on the coffee table, I realized this was only the beginning of reclaiming my life. What mattered now was moving forward, together but on new terms. I could hardly believe the silence when I stepped into Leela's room. No suitcase in the corner, no scattered clothes, just an empty bed framed by morning light. The air smelled faintly of lavender, the sachet I'd tucked under her pillow weeks ago still resting on the mattress. My heart fluttered with equal parts relief and sorrow. Relief that the tension had lifted, sorrow for the sister I'd fought so hard to protect, yet needed to let go. I traced the edge of her blanket and felt the finality of her absence, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Downstairs, the kitchen buzzed to life with the sizzling of butter and batter. Sophie and Leo clambered onto the stools, their faces bright as I flipped pancakes, the golden circles piling up like small miracles. Leo reached across the counter, dipping his finger into the batter still clinging to the spatula, and his giggle was the sweetest sound I'd heard in weeks. Sophie set the table without being asked, placing the syrup bottle and cinnamon shaker in perfect symmetry. In their easy companionship, I found my first real smile of the day. My mother hovered by the stove, hands wrapped around a teapot that steamed in the soft morning light. She met my eyes with hesitance, her shoulders slightly rounded, as if she were expecting me to push back or lash out. Instead, I offered her the apron I'd lent her earlier in the week. "Thank you," she said quietly, slipping it on. Her apology came in a whisper. "I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't see how much I was hurting you all." Her voice wavered on that single line, but it held enough sincerity to steady me. I poured tea into delicate china cups, the clink of porcelain comforting in its normalcy. "I know you love her," I said, pouring more tea into her cup than I'd intended. "But love doesn't mean letting someone tear your life apart." My words echoed the boundary I'd drawn days ago, the one that finally held firm. My mother nodded, eyes filling with tears I didn't ask her to hide. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for understanding." When we sat down to eat, the pancakes were light and fluffy, each bite a testament to the peace we'd fought to reclaim. Leo dipped his pancake into syrup until it vanished in a sticky glop, and I laughed, feeling tension slip from my shoulders. Sophie leaned against me, whispering, "Mama, it's like the sun came back." And in her bright gaze, I saw the truth of her words. For the first time in months, my house felt like home. Later, I walked through the rooms, each one unburdened. The guest room was still bare, the fresh sheets folded neatly in the linen closet, as though no one had ever slept there. In the living room, the coffee table bore only a single shard of the broken bowl, an artifact of the storm we'd weathered. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand, the edges smoothed by time and tears. It felt as much a part of our story as the laughter that now filled these walls again. I paused at the front door, gazing out at the quiet street of Columbus morning life. A neighbor's lawn mower hummed in the distance, the scent of fresh grass drifted in. My breath came easily, my chest unburdened for the first time in weeks. Love, I realized, sometimes means saying no so that everyone has the chance to say yes to healing. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a gentle thrill of possibility. The future stretched out before us, uncertain, yes, but also ours to shape. We'd rebuilt something fragile and beautiful, layer by painful layer, and now it stood on firmer ground. And as I walked back inside, the echo of my own heartbeat felt like a promise. We were whole again, and this time, we would stay that way.